Well, John is exactly right. We chose Tennessee, and I think we chose very well. Like a lot of people. I want to thank Jeff, the MC. I want to thank you, John, for everything you do in reaching out, educating me on this subject. Richard, who's the West Tennessee rep, gave me the history of firearms in Tennessee in 3 minutes, and then he gave it to all of you. And then all the sponsors that make this event possible. Lee Beeman, who I've had a chance to get to know, both of the congressmen who spoke before me. Courageous leadership that puts their money where their mouth is. It matters a lot in state capitals like Nashville. And I tell you, I didn't even know when I moved to Tennessee that the capital was in Nashville. I just was fleeing the Republic of New Jersey for anywhere that was free, and ultimately landed here. And normally on Saturday mornings, unfortunately, I'm not here. I'm normally in New York City, because I host Fox and Friends Weekend on Saturday and Sunday morning. So we live in Sumner County in Tennessee, but every Friday, shout out to Jeremy Mansfield and the constitutional conservative crew over there. We made sure when we moved, we are not going to be in Davidson County. We're definitely going to be in Sumner County. In the city of Goodlettsville, which I'm told, I'm learning you have to pronounce Goodlettsville. Like your mouth is full. I'm learning. Goodlettsville. But we moved there intentionally. But every Friday I have to fly to New York, and every Sunday I fly back and breathe a breath of fresh air. I fly every Friday to a gun-free zone. Whereas someone who's not a resident in New York, you couldn't get a permit anyway unless you were like Sean Hannity. You just couldn't get one. Well, now, because of the challenges of Gun Owners of America and TFA, here as a guest in New York, I plan to apply for a carry permit for the first time. I'm not just a sitting duck in a town full of illegals and gangs and criminals, all of which happily exercise their non-Second Amendment right in a giant gun-free zone. I also work in a business where there is a lot of ignorance about firearms. Have you ever noticed that? Most of the men who wear makeup on TV, but I'm a man who wears makeup on TV. Most of the yokels that wear makeup on TV have never even touched a fire alarm, let alone fire one or own one. We're talking, Manhattan, skinny jean, avocado toast types. And so when something happens across the country, around the world, they're yelling about assault rifles and machine guns and fully automatic and that Second Amendment right that's only for hunting. They just have no clue. And so I take very seriously as a United States Army veteran, as someone who served my country, like Congressman Green and so many others in this room, to speak on behalf of those who serve, for the Border Patrol agents, for the cops. I wasn't a cop, I wasn't a Border Patrol agent, but I know what it means to make a split-second decision that's life or death, to be second-guessed from some elite in an air-conditioned office who doesn't like the manner in which you do tough things. So every time I stand at a podium or the lights come on and the cameras, I try to channel the guys I served with. I try to channel the guys that are never going to stand at a podium, never going to host a TV show, but I have an opportunity to give them a voice, to not get it wrong. No, this is the type of rifle it was. This is the type of caliber it was. No, it's called a semi-automatic rifle, and here's why the scary version you talk about is no different than this non-scary looking version over here. All the ignorance that the left and the gun grabbers peddle in the media to try to get sheeple to go along with common sense gun reform, which we all know is just code for taking away, slice by slice, cut by cut, that God-given Second Amendment right that we all cherish in this room. We have to fight it on every level we can. So we landed in Tennessee 2 years ago, best decision we ever made. And I actually thought about this morning. Okay, so I was born in Minnesota, then I moved to New Jersey for school, then I moved to New York City, then to DC, then to Massachusetts, then to Minnesota, then to New Jersey, and finally to Tennessee. It's like I deployed to every liberal hellhole possible, where I had to like check the fine print of everything possible. Can I even own a gun? How do I store the gun? Where do I store the ammo? Where do I keep the codes? Am I within 4,000 miles of a school? What do I do? Where it always felt like I was not free. And we moved for the people, the faith, the food, the weather, the music, all of it. We ultimately moved to a school, a classical Christian school that we absolutely love, that teaches the classics, the great books, the Bible, Greek, Latin, theology, history, philosophy, all the things. Who here took social studies? Social studies. Everybody? I took social studies. You know what social studies is? Made up. It's a made up subject. The left made it up about 80 years ago because they wanted to get rid of history and theology and philosophy and the classic and religion, all of geography, because you can't manipulate those things. But if you put it in a basket and call it social studies, then you kind of teach whatever you want. And you can manipulate your latest methods to try to craft the minds of young kids and control them. So we specifically moved to a classical Christian school that we absolutely love, and actually found a church that was even better. But we ultimately moved for freedom. That word you've heard a lot tonight, for freedom. We want to raise our kids in a place that reinforces the values that we believe in. I wasn't born here, I wasn't raised here, but I got here as fast as I could. And I hope my kids throw down roots here, because it's all about freedom. In fact, a lot of people have YouTube TV now because of DirecTV for NFL Sunday tickets, so you can watch all the football games. Is it SEC football on YouTube TV? I'm an old Big Ten guy, but we're happily Tennessee Volunteers now. We have the Minnesota Golden Gophers in Minnesota. Don't blame me for quickly and swiftly changing my allegiances. So SEC football as well. But you know how you can watch the quad box? It's got 4 games on one screen. Well, because I'm in the news business, I nerd out and I watch news at home in the quad box. So you've got Fox and MSNBC and CNN and BBC all at the same time. Consider it opposition research while watching the news. I know what Fox is watching, but what are the crazies at MSNBC talking about? Because that's what Kamala Harris is going to be talking about. And my daughter, Kenzie, she's 11. She looked up at the screen and they were talking about, MSNBC was talking about some religious topic disparaging God. And the guest there's title was the Freedom from Religion Foundation. And she kind of looked at me and she said, isn't it freedom of religion? I said, yeah, Kenzie. This is what the left does. They even change the names of their organizations into lies to try to manipulate people that we need freedom from religion. And he was talking about the Constitution and how there shouldn't be God in the public square. And my daughter simply looked at me and said, why don't they just read the actual Constitution? Well, most schools, by the way, don't read original documents at all, or original sources. But of course, they reject the left, the gun grabbers reject the Constitution, and they use new words. They use the same words in new ways. What's a classic example is democracy. Since Woodrow Wilson, the left has been using the frame democracy. That's all you hear if you turn on MSNBC is threats to democracy, save the democracy. You know who really didn't want a democracy? The founders of our country. They were inherently suspicious of all democracies, because democracies devolved into majority rule, where the majority could take away the rights of the minority. We are not a democracy. We pledge allegiance to the republic for which it stands. Our founders understood what happened in the garden in Genesis, the hubris of human nature, the sinful nature of man, and that if given too much power, it corrupts, and that corruption means oppression and control. They'd seen it before, they'd read their history books, and they specifically, as Congressman Green pointed out, had checks and balances and diffuse power, so that as few people as possible could consolidate it. So democracy is a sham word, as it's used today by the left. Another one is freedom. Did you watch the DNC? I didn't watch much, but what little I was forced to watch for opposition research, the word freedom was everywhere. No, it was on the banners, it was in the speech, it was on the podium. Freedom, 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 freedom. Now, their definition of freedom is freedom to abort any baby until 9 months, freedom to trans your kid at 13, freedom to not pay your student loans, freedom to run across the border anytime, freedom to confiscate your hard-earned tax dollars. You know, they even want to get at unrealized capital gains. I mean, the fact that the money that you make that you don't cash in on, you're taxed on it, it would crater the economy. They don't care. Freedom is the word they use. Because they know America's a center-right country. That word matters to people. They just use it as a different code. Again, this is something the left has been doing for a long time. Eleanor Roosevelt was mentioned for a second. Well, her husband, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, in his third inaugural address, at the beginning of his third term in his State of the Union address, coined this idea of 4 freedoms. You may have heard of it, you may not. These are the 4 freedoms that FDR laid out in 1941 before the war. Freedom of speech, right? Freedom of worship, good. And then it was freedom from want and freedom from fear. I've looked it up. I don't see freedom from want or freedom from fear anywhere in our Declaration or our Constitution. Freedom from want? What do I have to do, go to Costco every day? No, freedom from want is absurd. We all want. And the government's gonna provide a freedom from want or freedom from fear? Okay, freedom from fear sounds good, but doesn't this list sound good enough already that Franklin Delano Roosevelt and others could have listed? I don't know, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, freedom to keep and bear arms, freedom from unreasonable searches, from self-incrimination, freedom to have speedy and public trials, a jury trial, or speedy and public trial, a jury trial, excessive bail. I love the 9th Amendment. The enumeration of rights does not deny other rights. And the 10th Amendment, which Tennessee ought exercise as aggressively as possible, all powers not given to the federal government specifically by the Constitution are reserved for the states and we, the people, us. You see, all the way back before FDR to Woodrow Wilson when you meet the folks that peddled the philosophies that dominate the modern Democrat Party today, they are communists, they are Marxists, they are atheists, they are humanists. All of them who reject our founding generation and our founding documents. That's never enough. They always want more control. They always want to make sure that you will comply with their latest scheme of 15 minutes ago, some utopian scheme that promises heaven but delivers hell. One great example was my former governor in New Jersey. His name is Phil Murphy. He's a real loser. During COVID, he did an interview with Tucker Carlson. Tucker asked him a question about the Bill of Rights and the restrictions they were putting on the citizens of New Jersey. And Governor Murphy said, "The Bill of Rights is above my pay grade." That's the mindset of modern lefties. If the Bill of Rights is above your pay grade and you don't care about it, just look at history. What's the first step that those who want more control want to take? Always. They want to take your guns. They want to take your ability to defend yourself and your family and have checks on your rights. It's the first thing they want to do. And we know that the modern Democrat Party, given any opportunity, any opening, would confiscate your guns in a half second. That is who they are. That is what they believe. They're on the record as saying it. And the scary part is they've basically taken over those other 1A freedoms. See, the 2A freedom is still kind of there in most places, sort of. But what about religion, freedom of religion? Well, religion's been stripped out of public life. We were told there's a wall of separation between church and state, that it's freedom from religion. And Christians have retreated out of cowardice, for the most part, out of too many quarters of public life. Churches and pastors have given it at the same time. So our First Amendment is under assault on faith. How about freedom of speech? The most dangerous words in our lexicon right now are misinformation and disinformation. Because today's misinformation and disinformation on one side gets used against you on another issue in another way, and now you are silenced. Thank God for Elon Musk buying Twitter, turning it to X, creating an actual place where there is actual free speech. Look what they're doing in other countries. Look what they're doing in Europe. They would like, our press in this country would like to do the same here. They're happy to be censors, and that's the freedom of the press. The press here is completely, except for Fox News, a few other spots, talk radio. Brian Wilson is here, by the way. Brian, where are you at? I love Brian Wilson's radio show. He has me on every week. Where is he? There he is. There are a few places where the press still does their job, but they're mostly complicit. But they really want the Second Amendment. You know, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Biden says, and you know the thing. That all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To secure those rights, governments are instituted amongst men, deriving their powers from where? The consent of the governed. Not from what an expert tells you, not from what a bureaucrat tells you, not from what some majority leader can ram through, but from the consent of the governed. If you go on to read the Declaration of Independence and you take it seriously, you recognize that what they were talking about was overthrowing governments that had become insufferable. And that is the right of mankind to do so. Throw off the chains of tyranny. And that was enshrined in our Constitution and in our Bill of Rights, the fundamental recognition of the importance of rights given by God, not by government. So when I moved to Tennessee, John mentioned it, we thought we're in the land of freedom. And we are, compared to New Jersey. That's like, I don't know. You take your pick, example. I was gonna say, who's the University of Tennessee's biggest rival? Georgia? Alabama? Auburn? Alabama? All right, it's like Alabama or, I might go to that game this year, by the way. Anyway, non sequitur. I thought I was moving to the land of freedom, which we were. And I was talking to my neighbor, Frank, who's a great guy. He wasn't born here, moved here when he was about 5 years old, raised here, farmer, great guy. And we just sit drinking whiskey, talking. I said, hey, I'm glad I don't have to get a permit. We're in a constitutional carry state. And he goes, what are you talking about? I said, yeah, I Googled it. We're good. He goes, you better check again there, son. What do you mean? He goes, you better get yourself an enhanced permit. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself in some trouble if you have to use that so-called constitutional carry. So if you look at it, there's a lot of politicians that are invested, a lot of Republican politicians invested in creating the idea that Tennessee is a constitutional carry state. And on a lot of websites and others on the internet, you'll find that. And you might think it is. But for all the reasons that previous speakers pointed out, what is very clear is Tennessee does not have full and real constitutional carry, which means it is not a true Second Amendment freedom state. We don't have the full right to have it, as it was explained to me. We have lots of defenses between us and the government. See, the burden of proof is still on me to show why I should have a gun, as opposed to the government telling me why in the world they're able to infringe on me in the first place. It's completely backwards for all the reasons that were laid out by Richard, which date back to I didn't know that the reason that the defense was needed was because of a Jim Crow law. Well, how about all these racist Democrats in Tennessee? Better fix that. Or how about all the squish Republicans? We got a Jim Crow law on the books. Better fix that. I don't care. Let's use their tactics against them. I don't give a damn. All they do is name call all day long. Obfuscate, name call, make up fake charges. The reality is, it should be our right to carry, even something like permitless carry, which is a defense, right? Well, what if it says you have to be lawfully present? I don't know in every scenario what that means. You certainly can't be in a public park or a greenway, so you're checking your GPS everywhere you go, hoping that your permitless carry carries over to wherever you are. And of course, this only applies to handguns. I believe it's the right to bear arms, rifles, shotguns, handguns, not just pistols. We are a long way from constitutional carry, unfortunately. Better than most, better than many, not what it should be for a state whose history is proudly premised on volunteers carrying their own personal rifles, which is a beautiful thing. You know, the courts are in our favor right now, but they may not be soon. You heard that, hanging by a thread. One more administration, a couple Supreme Court justices, all the lower courts flipped over, heaven forbid, 2 terms of a left-wing president, and you have a very different situation. Now is the time to enshrine these rights. Now is the time for a state legislature to take this action. You know, John pointed out to me the Bruen decision, which is officially New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruen. It was decided in the Supreme Court 2 years ago. I mean, this is beautiful, originalist, constitutional thinking. Here's what Alito and others gave us on that court. Unless the restriction to the Second Amendment was in place when the Second Amendment was passed in 1791, then it is unconstitutional. What do the Republicans in our legislature have to say about that? Wave that in front of every Republican, rank and file and leadership, and say, why in the world are we a state? How in the world does Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine have constitutional carry, but Tennessee does not? This is a layup. This is the kind of game where if it gets on the floor of the Tennessee House and the Tennessee Senate, guess what? That sucker's gonna pass. But there are shadowy interests behind the scene, inside committees that are invested in seeing these bills fail. That's why TFA, that's why the Tennessee Firearms Association is so important. I don't know who those legislators are. I don't know what pressures are coming upon them. I don't know what special interests have already lined their pockets. I don't know who their next opponent might be. I don't know where their vulnerabilities are. But that's the job of the Tennessee Firearms Association, to directly have those conversations, run those ads, put that pressure on, and take the things in smoke-filled, quiet rooms out into public, and forced rhinos and squishy Republicans to do what they actually say they believe in. That's why PACs like this are so important. And what was said before very briefly is important. Your money for TFA, my money for TFA, is the ammunition that they carry. Money is bullets. That money goes targeted at a legislator or a district or a race. I was told the state Senate Judiciary Committee, half of that committee is up for re-election. That's the important gateway committee. And there's only one member of that committee of that half that they'd like to see stay. So targeting those challengers to those incumbents on this issue is something TFA does. Man, I'll be proud if in 2030 I'm able to cast a vote for a constitutional conservative Republican governor and a constitutional amendment that enshrines absolute and complete constitutional carry in Tennessee. It's 6 years away, that's nothing. The spade work is there to be done, and it needs to be done. You know, I've learned a lot about Tennessee politics in just a couple years and had a lot of great mentors in helping me understand it. There are a few Democrats, lots of Republicans that are actually Democrats, and then a lot of squishy Republicans, and then you've got real constitutional Republicans. And I didn't understand that concept at first because I was just excited when we moved here in August of 2022. So there was a governor's race in that November. And when I was watching the returns of my new home state, and Tennessee was called for the Republican governor with 0% of precincts reporting, I said, I'm home. First time ever. It's always 0% of precincts reporting the Democrat wins where I live. The other way around, I said, it's it. And that's a beautiful thing. But the key is the right kinds of Republicans. It's a sneaky, insidious game. I've heard from a bunch of you out there, party registration and party affiliation to have closed primaries is really important. I don't want Democrats telling me what Republican we should be choosing. It's not that hard. Again, it requires, you know how they oftentimes say converts are the most enthusiastic supporters, whether it's to Christianity. Well, I feel like that's a lot of times what it's like for converts to Tennessee who are new residents, and they're like, all right, what are we gonna do? We got a lot of Republicans in this state. Why don't we have full constitutional carry? I don't know, it's been kind of hard. What are you talking about? We're Republicans. Let's go. And I think that's the kind of guts, enthusiasm that newcomers and longtime residents need to combine together to kick out oftentimes some of the complacent folks. And I don't know the terrain here. I don't know who the big power players are and who the big families are and all that. I know that's reality in politics everywhere. All I know is this is a state that embodies as close to anybody else the spirit of we the people, of we want to live free. We love God. I mean, I knew I was in the right place today when we prayed an opening prayer to Jesus and ate barbecue. That's it. But just like Texas, just like any other state, the left is coming for Tennessee. Look at how they elevated the Tennessee 3 after their gun grab protest following the Covenant School shooting. They didn't achieve anything. There was a lot of noise, but there was a special session and possibly a red flag law. I mean, they're gonna agitate and agitate and agitate. If we have cowardly, seat-warming, backbenching Republicans, then they will gain ground on common sense, nonsense legislation. I love this sign back here because right now in 2024 is definitely not the time to compromise. There is no reason to compromise. What does the left do when they have supermajorities? They get stuff done. Anything they want, and there's a lot of good things that get done in Tennessee. I recognize that. The last thing I'm gonna do is move here and just complain. I'm grateful for what the forefathers of this state have done. Men and women I'll never know, who I've never met. You know what we did find out though? I wasn't prepared to tell this story, but there's an old grave plot in the back of our property, which I was not aware of. And we were aware of it when we bought the property, but we didn't know who was buried there. So I went back, cleaned off the gravestone. And her name is Lydia Stark, buried in 1840. It was the old courthouse. The old judge used to live kind of around where we lived. And you know the motto of New Hampshire is live free or die, right? Do you know who said that and made it the state motto? General John Stark was the general who coined the phrase live free or die in a letter to his troops. Well, Lydia Stark is his granddaughter. So the granddaughter of the man who said live free or die is buried on our property. That gives you a sense, gave me a humbling sense of the commitment, of the grit, of the tradition, of the love of the soil and the people and the country. Of you drive around this state and you realize the conflict that occurred, but then the rebuilding and the healing afterwards. This state has been a centerpiece of this country for a really long time. And I know the centerpiece of any successful state is a healthy 2A, which leads to a healthy 1A, which means if you can't actually speak with your mouth what you're thinking in your mind, you're not actually free. That's why my job is really easy. I get paid money to give an opinion on television. Super easy. I don't pretend to be a journalist. I am not a journalist. I'm an opinion commentator who delivers the news and tells you exactly how I feel about it. You know what I believe, you know where I'm coming from. If you don't like it, you can change the channel. That's really easy. It's much harder for a nurse or a school teacher or a businessman or a line worker or a teacher to speak their mind about the things they believe in a culture where the left descends. We have to stand up courageously and speak what we believe as boldly as possible so that the next generation has a possibility to do the same. That's why Tennessee deserves elected leaders who will come alongside TFA in these next legislative sessions and actually make it happen. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I kind of want to end with the three things I think Tennessee could do, and TFA is in the middle of one of them. Life. After Roe v. Wade was struck down, Tennessee had what in place? A trigger law, right? So the minute Roe v. Wade was struck down, abortion became illegal in the state of Tennessee. It was a beautiful thing. Yet we already have Republican legislators wringing their hands about how we can loosen that up a little bit. How about we stand behind the unborn and stand behind life? Liberty is easy. We just talked about a constitutional carry. You're not free unless you can defend yourself, your family. You want to do a little hunting, that's fine. But ultimately, a check against tyranny. It is a check. You hear Joe Biden all the time, we don't have F-16s and F-14s. What do you think? He'll be done soon. He's already as his visiting angel. They don't understand. They don't get it. They don't understand what our founders understood about the depths that government will go to complete total control. It may not be happening now, but that's where they want to go. And then finally, the pursuit of happiness. It's the pursuit of happiness. There's no reason why Tennessee shouldn't have full school choice, by the way. It's another issue. If you're a Republican or a conservative or a constitutional conservative, you don't believe in equal outcomes. That's the left. They're the ones that want to build a big state government-run economy and everyone has the same slice of bread. You believe in equal opportunity. The equal opportunity to be up and out to achieve the American dream. And I can't choose where I was born or who my parents were or if I'm tall, short, smart, or dumb. But what a schooling can do, what an education can do is give you an opportunity to outpace your capabilities and succeed. And there's too many people in this state, in states across the country, trapped in failing government schools, not just being indoctrinated, but also just straight up not being told how to conjugate a verb or, write a sentence in paragraph form. And that's a failure. And there's no reason why the Tennessee legislature can't pass full school choice. So TFA is on the front lines for you, for me now, just as much me as you, as a new resident here, even though I barely got my New Jersey plates off. I couldn't get them off fast enough. It only took me a couple months, but we are so proud to be here. We're so thankful for what generations before us has done for us here. And I pray that every son of a gun that moves after me, I was called a Yankee, I'm gonna call them Yankees too, does not bring their politics with them. God bless you all. Thank you.